They lived for glory, they died for glory, and glory is their eternal reward. From age to age shall their names go down to the posterity as gems of the sanctified.
Coming up next, the martyrdom of Joseph and Hyrum Smith.
KJAZ Television, in cooperation with the Church History Department of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, presents this weekly series highlighting the research of scholars and historians as they prepare for the publication of the Joseph Smith Papers. And now your host, Glenn Rawson.
In today's show, we'll discuss those events that culminated in the martyrdom of Joseph and Hyrum Smith.
One of the most aggravating events that undoubtedly led to public sentiment against Joseph Smith and the Latter-day Saints was, of course, the destruction of the Nauvoo expositor.
After much deliberation, the city government determined that the press was a public nuisance and ordered the city marshal to destroy it. After the press was destroyed, the publishers fled Nauvoo and went to Carthage, where they filed a complaint charging the mayor, Joseph Smith, and the city council with riot. Now that's interesting, because the issue evidently with them is not that the press was destroyed, but how it was done.
The riot under Illinois law comprised one of two methods. One, two or more people doing an unlawful act. Clearly you don't have this. Or two or more people doing a lawful act in a violent manner. Joseph is, and they use the term, discharged, not acquitted. The case isn't over. It's just that the arresting warrant was found not to have probable cause.
The discharge of the arrest warrant caused an uproar. So the Mormons decided to try the case again to see if they could quell it.
And they decided this time to go outside of Nauvoo City and to use a local justice of the peace, a non-Mormon justice of the peace, Daniel H. Wells. And he then similarly concludes that there aren't sufficient facts to have probable cause that in fact a riot occurred by the destruction of the newspaper. And that is where Joseph thinks now he has somewhat resolved it. And that is until Governor Ford gets involved, who has come now to Carthage and is reviewing the facts.
The governor then writes a letter and says, in effect, Joseph, you produce your body here in Carthage forthwith, or I'm going to send the militia out to get you. And if it has to come to that, there will be war until everybody in Nauvoo is exterminated.
On the 22nd of June, 1844, Joseph Smith wrote to the governor, and he invited him to come to Nauvoo and to determine for himself what really happened with the destruction of the Nauvoo expositor.
He went on to say, I would come to Carthage, but because of these affidavits that I've just furnished you, saying my life would be in danger if I did, I dare not come. It's then that the governor writes a letter saying, I pledge the faith of myself and the state for your safety.
Early in the morning of June 24th, 1844, Joseph Smith bid farewell to his family and set out for Carthage.
As they get to the top of the hill where the Nauvoo temple is, Joseph looks back over the city and says, this is the loveliest place and the best people under heaven. Little do they know the trials that await them.
After posting bail on the riot charge, the Mormon prisoners were about to return to Nauvoo when the sheriff appeared with a mittimus, charging Joseph and Hyrum with treason. They were ordered to jail.
You can't write a mittimus for that to happen without having had a bail hearing first. His mittimus says a hearing was held, but none in fact was. That was called to the governor's attention early on. And remember, Ford, before he became governor, was justice of the state Supreme Court. He had been an attorney, he'd been a lawyer. He jolly well knew that Justice of the Peace Smith's mittimus was false. The overriding point to be made here is that the people at Carthage were borrowing a leaf from the Missouri book and holding him on a charge for which no bail could be raised long enough for them to kill him.
Thursday, June 27th, 1844, the day of martyrdom.
The prophet writes a letter to Emma Smith, and among other things in this letter, he says at the last of it that she is not to be concerned about the fact that he is now charged with treason, because he says, I have committed no treason. Sometime after finishing the letter, Dan Jones returns to the jail, tells the prophet that while he's been out mingling amongst the people, he has discovered there are plots on the prophet's life, that he should be very concerned because there are men that are bent on killing him. Then the prophet also learned that the governor is going to take the 1,400 members of the militia with him to Nauvoo, and he's not going to take Joseph Smith with him, but he's leaving behind a small group to guard the Carthage jail.
The troops that were left to guard the prisoners were the Carthage Greys. They were a local militia unit who were no friends of the saints. And about 6 miles out of Nauvoo, Governor Ford disbanded most of the rest of the militia, telling them to go home.
Thomas Sharp, with about 80 individuals from Warsaw, instead of going home, begin to make their way to Carthage, Illinois, and the jail, bent on destroying Joseph Smith. The governor then goes on into Nauvoo, Illinois, and so about the same time that Joseph and Hiram are being killed in the Carthage jail, the governor is being served a meal in the prophet's own home.
The prisoners spent most of the afternoon of June 27th preparing for their trial, which was scheduled 2 days hence. Now by this time, there are only 4 men remaining in the jail: Joseph and Hiram Smith, John Taylor, and Willard Richards.
Before the changing of the guard, John Taylor is asked by Hiram Smith to sing a song that had just become popular in Nauvoo. It's a ballad. We now call it A Poor Wayfaring Man of Grief. It has lots of verses, and John Taylor sang all of the verses. And then a bit later, Hiram again asks John Taylor to sing this ballad again, which he reluctantly does. He says he doesn't feel much like singing, but he responds to Hiram's request. Hiram then reads a little bit from Josephus, and then by this time Thomas Sharp and his group have arrived in Carthage. The first shots that are fired into the cell where the serious prisoners are kept, because apparently the mob believed that's where Joseph and Hiram and the others were incarcerated. Upon hearing these shots, Joseph and the others close the door to the jailer's bedroom. There's a shot that is fired through the keyhole that doesn't hit anyone, and then Hiram puts his left shoulder against the door with his head bowed, or a second ball punched through the door panel, and Hiram received that ball just left of his nose. The ball exited through his throat and grazed his breast. He fell backwards, saying, "I am a dead man." Joseph looks at Hiram and says, "Oh, my poor dear brother Hiram."
Joseph Smith then fired the pepper box into the mob, a small 6-shooter pistol that had been smuggled in, while John Taylor used the walking stick to knock down the gun barrels as they were thrust into the room.
After the prophet has discharged his weapon, John Taylor realizes that he's not doing very much good with his rascal beater, and so he makes a dash for the east window, intending to jump. A ball from the landing behind him struck Taylor in the left thigh, grazed the bone, and pushed within a half an inch of the other side of his body. He collapsed on the wide sill, denting the back of his vest pocket watch. The force shattered the glass cover of the timepiece against his ribs and pushed the internal gear pins against the enamel face, thus popping out a small segment that was later mistakenly identified as a bullet hole. So it was the windowsill that caused the watch to break and stop, not a bullet as we've thought. Tumbling back into the room, he crawled toward the nearby bed when one ball hit his left forearm, lodging in the wrist, and another struck the bone just below the left knee. Another ball hit him and tore the flesh from his left hip, splattering blood on the wall and floor of the jail. Joseph then ran to the window. With one leg dangling outside of the window, he shouted, "O Lord my God," which is the beginning of the Masonic distress signal. A ball from the door pierced his right hip and exited through his lower body. A shot from outside entered his right chest and exited below the shoulder blade, and another hit under the heart. A fourth shot may have hit the right collarbone. Joseph fell to the ground, landing on his left side. He died within moments, trying to set up against the well.